Hey guys, welcome back to another Planet Mithril Paints, and today we'll be exploring the original sculpt of Gandalf the Grey, the Grey Pilgrim, Mithrandir, the Wandering Wizard, one of the Astari sent to Middle-earth as a guardian of all things good and pure, the instigator who found out about the One Ring's return and started Frodo on his quest to Mount Doom and the ultimate freedom of the free peoples in Middle-earth from the dark forces of Sauron. So without further delay, please sit back, relax and enjoy the video. We're going to have to compensate for the fact that Gandalf's face is overshadowed quite severely by the brim of his big pointy hat, but we'll be dealing with this later on in the skin painting process. To start off with, paint the hands and face with Bugman's Glow. Apply an all-over layer with a mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone. Once the wash is dry, relayer with the previous mix, leaving the Reichland flesh shade showing in the recesses. Make sure here to start blocking out the majority of Gandalf's wrinkles and separating out the fingers. As he is the age he is, nothing personal Gandalf, it's important we start creating the wizened, well-travelled look to the Grey Pilgrim early on in the painting process. Apply another layer now with pure Cadian Flesh Tone, further defining the wrinkles and features across Gandalf's face and hands. Now we're going to highlight Gandalf's skin with a mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh. The Kislev Flesh here will give the skin a slightly more weather-worn look, in contrast to the usual addition of Pallid Witch Flesh at this stage, and will bring the hue up enough that all your highlights will be noticeable from underneath the hat brim. This also helps the Grey Pilgrim keep a degree of warmth to his skin, which reflects him in the film perfectly. Finally, apply an edge highlight with a mix of Kislev Flesh and Pallid Witch Flesh to the most pronounced wrinkles, the tip and the nostrils of the big schnoz, and the knuckles gripping the sword and staff. This is going to be extremely bright, so make sure to apply carefully to keep the overall look looking natural. Once this has been done, you can also pick out the eyes with Abaddon Black and Pallid Witch Flesh. Start painting the beard and the hair protruding down over his shoulders with Rakarth Flesh. The Rakarth Flesh, whilst more beige in overall tone, does have a slight grey hue running through it, which will serve as a subtle tone throughout the painting of all the hair. Apply an all-over layer with a mix of Rakarth Flesh and Screaming Skull. Be extremely careful with the moustache. The face on this particular sculpt is quite small, so maintaining a good point to your brush will be crucial in maintaining that the paint goes exactly where you want it to. Once the wash is dried, carefully start picking out individual hairs down the length of the beard and all the hair with the previous mix, leaving the Agravax earthshade showing in the recesses. This will bring a slight degree of warmth to the cascades of grey and white hair. The beard will be more challenging as a lot of the strands blend together in the sculpt, so take your time to work out where you need to apply your layers here. The more precise you can be here, the better the overall look will be once finished. Add some padded witch flesh to the mix for the first highlight stage. Now focus on pushing the previous layers further, keeping your highlights tight and thin to give the hair a slight wiry, unkempt, all over more wizardy look. Continue to add padded witch flesh to push the highlights further on the beard. Finally, using pure padded witch flesh, apply a final dot to the tips and the uppermost curls of the hair and beard. You'd think with the name Gandalf the Grey, we'd be using a multitude of greys, whites and blacks for the majority of the model. Ah, well there my friends, you would be incorrect. Whilst we will be using grey tones throughout the model, we're going to be painting the different areas of Gandalf with slightly more pigmented tones so we don't end up with an amorphous grey undefined blob on the tabletop. We want to give the outer robe a distinct, slight bluish hue to reflect the outer cape he sports in the Fellowship of the Ring. To start this off, base coat the outer robes with a mix of Abaddon Black and Dark Reaper. Now, for the first layer stage, add a small amount of Dawnstone to the mix and layer over the whole model. This will look like quite an odd pigmented colour, but stick with us, the overall finished cloak really benefits from these grey tones being added so early on. Once the blue and black wash has dried, we'll end up with an off-grey, slightly blue tinted cloak, which is the effect we want to promote throughout the subsequent highlighting phases. Now, relayer over the robes again with the previous mix, leaving the wash showing in the deepest recesses. There's a lot of defined sculpted material folds here, which make these applications really easy to apply in a natural fashion. Now we're going to add some Fenrisian Grey to the whole mix for the first highlight stage. This, in our mind, was the best choice of paint to add because it simultaneously accentuates both the grey and the blue tones of the robes really nicely and doesn't result in Gandalf inadvertently becoming the third mysterious blue wizard. Focuses on more of the pronounced folds of the robes to create a natural flow through the material. For the final edge highlight, we'll be adding even more Fenrisian Grey to the mix and concentrating on the upper and outermost folds of the robes. Your mix here should be an approximate split of 50% Fenrisian Grey and 50% the original layer mix. You can add this in smaller increments leading up to this final highlight stage, but we didn't feel the model really needed it, and the overall look of the cloak is exactly what we were looking for. Greys? Greys? We're finally using actual greys? To create some differentiation between the inner and outer robes, base coat all the inner robes with a 50-50 mix of Skaven Blight Dinge and Mechanica Standard Grey. To maintain some continuity with the outer robes, we're now going to add Dawnstone to the mix for the first all-over layer on the inner robes. Once the wash is dried, re-layer over the inner robes again with the previous mix, leaving the wash showing in the recesses. Now we're going to gradually add in Administratum Grey to the mix for the following highlight stages, which will lift the hue of the grey very naturally across the upper layers of material. Continue to add more Administratum Grey to the mix for the final edge highlight down the length of the inner robes, as well as framing the sectioned off hem at the very bottom. Your mix should consist of approximately 50% Administratum Grey by this point. Carefully now, pick out the belt around his waist and the staff with dried bark. Now apply a fine edge highlight with Gorthor Brown. Make sure to catch the warped wood at the top of the staff and draw your paint down in long vertical lines to create a wood grain effect throughout. Paint Glamdring and pick out any buckles across Gandalf's waist with Leadbelcher. Once the wash is dry, apply an edge highlight with Runefang Steel down the length of the blade and across the ornate hill. Now on to Gandalf's bigot feature, the 6-foot tall hat that sits proudly atop his wizened head. Yes, we know it's not really 6 foot. We want this to have a much more vibrant blue hue to it than any other part of the model. To start off, base coat with a mix of Dark Reaper, Abaddon Black and Macragge Blue. The majority of the mix being the Reaper and Abaddon, with the Macragge just adding that subtle lift of blue which will translate nicely once we finish the hat. Once the wash is dried, add in Thunderhawk Blue for the first layer stage, leaving the wash showing in the recesses. You can focus this on the front of the hat and leave the majority of the underside showing the washed base coat, which will create a really nice light shadow effect. Once the wash is dry, relayer over the previous mix, leaving the wash showing in the folds of the hat. Now we're going to be adding Fenrisian Grey to the mix for the first highlight stage. This, as with the robes, lifts the blue tones really nicely. Focus now on drawing this towards the brim edges of the hat and defining all the folds of the hat as it curls backwards. Continue to add more Fenrisian Grey to the mix and push these highlights further to create a natural blend between the darker and the lighter areas of hat. Finally, apply a fine edge highlight with pure Fenrisian Grey right on the very edge of the brim and the uppermost areas of folded material. Now, as a final finishing detail, carefully pick up the crystal sitting in the top of the staff with a small dot of pallid witch flesh. And there we have it, Gandalf the Grey, finished and ready to lead the Fellowship on their quest to Mordor. Well, part of the way anyway. Remember to take your time while painting this model, there's absolutely no rush, it arrives precisely when it means to.